Today's study tip says, think like the teacher. Write exam questions as if you were the teacher. Simply pick a topic and design a question with multiple choice answers, or write a fill-in-the-blank for labs. Trade them with your study partners and see how you score. So recently someone was talking to me, a student was talking to me about the reading quizzes. She thinks they're really hard. So if you're thinking like the teacher, you should know that your teacher, Professor Hayes, does not read the book when I write a reading quiz. Okay? All I do is skim it. I look for bold words, I look for titles, I look for first sentences, I look for the stories, and the question she was asking about was actually a picture. And I look at the pictures and I go, oh, they should be looking at the picture, and I chose the question from the picture. Okay, so think like the teacher. I'm not reading the book. You should read the book, but I'm not reading it. So when you're looking at, how should I study this, think about how the professor is looking at it. Chapter 19, Regulation of Metabolism. Today we talk about nutrition and metabolism. Metabolism is the use of foods to make energy and build complex chemicals. Catabolism is a word we use to break down nutrients, and anabolism is the word to build. Say the word catabolism. Say the word anabolism. So we accent the second A in those words when we say it. But if we have anabolic steroid, have you heard of those? That's what someone would take, maybe a baseball player, okay, an anabolic steroid to build more muscle mass. In that case, we accent the A, the first A. But when we say catabolism, it's not like cannibalism, okay? It's catabolism. Say catabolism. And say anabolism. Right, and together they make up metabolism. The basic food groups are carbohydrates, fats, proteins, plus vitamins and minerals. And the goal of metabolism is to break down food for energy to make ATP. So your metabolic rate is measured in kilocalories, which we just call calories. So when you say there's 350 calories in that muffin you just got, Starbucks, we mean kilocalories. Okay, so if you look at the back of labels or back of a box, look at the label on food, you'll see it says 9 kilocalories per gram for fat and 4 kilocalories per gram for protein and carbohydrate. Did you know that? So you get more bang for your buck in fat, and that's because of all those CH2, CH2, CH2. Remember, whenever you break a bond, energy is released. So in a fat chain of CH2s, there's a lot of bonds to be broken. Excuse me. One of the things I want you to get inspired about with this lecture is actually looking at labels. Okay, I want you to start looking at labels. For our lab related to this, you're going to keep track of what you eat for a day. I know you've taken nutrition, and I'm sure nutrition you did start looking at labels, and if you haven't taken nutrition, you will, but I want you to start that again. I want you to start taking some time to look at labels, okay? And not just for, how many calories, but for the nutrients and for the contents of it, okay? What we do to measure metabolic rate is we use a machine called a calorimeter, and that's really a has the word calorie, right? So it's the amount of heat produced by the body. So we also use a respirometer. The equation to use if you use a respirometer is food plus oxygen becomes CO2 plus water and heat. So we assume that the amount of oxygen you consume tells us about the heat that you're releasing, and the heat that you're releasing is the kilocalories. So for example, if you're just sitting, and I've done this experiment before when I taught at UC Davis, put a mask on a student with a respirometer around their face, over their mouth, and you plug their nose, and they have to breathe through the respirometer. We do it while they're just sitting, and we measure the amount of oxygen they consume, plug it into an equation, we get the heat that they release. Then we do the same experiment with them riding a bicycle. And it's a little awkward to ride a bicycle with this face mask on and nose plugged and slobbering everywhere. But then, of course, they release more heat when they exercise, and we can measure that by the amount of oxygen they consume. Okay, that's a neat experiment. The calorimeter, by the way, is measuring body heat by actually measuring the heat, and it's really difficult to use. It's actually a room. It's a room with water circulating in tubes, and this is the most accurate way to do it, to measure the heat coming off of the body. And you have to be naked, a little awkward to do it, in order to measure the heat coming off the body that raises the temperature of the water in the surrounding tubes. So as you can imagine, there's not a lot of calorimeters around. It's hard to have a room set up for that project. Respirometer is much easier. So we instead will use an equation to figure out what we think our metabolic rate is. And it's based on your age, gender, stress, surface area, and hormones. So let's talk about those. As we get older, what happens to the metabolic rate? It goes down. Trust me on that one. Okay, gender, who burns more calories just sitting, men or women? Who has more muscle? I told you this, even a really workout strong woman doesn't have as much muscle mass. Just part of the deal. Your body never knows when there might be a pregnancy. Okay, so gender, men burn more calories because of that muscle mass. Stress, more or less calories burned. When you're stressed, there is more calories burned, right? Surface area, okay, that means like if you're a petite person, or like me, tall, big person, who has more surface area, me or a petite 5 foot or a 4'10" student? I do, yeah. So I have a higher metabolic rate, and lucky for me, I can eat a lot more than that small student. Hormones, there's thyroid hormones, we talked about adrenal hormones, cortisol, all that stuff. So all those things change your metabolic rate. The basal metabolic rate is the total heat produced by the body. It's measured at rest, when you're awake, not digesting, and you have warm body temperature. So this would be done, say, first thing in the morning. You may have heard of taking your basal body temperature, so you would take your temperature first thing in the morning, or checking your basal heart rate. All that would be done like first thing in the morning when you wake up. So that's the amount of heat that you produce, or the kilocalories that you make, that you use every day just being alive. Okay? But of course you do a lot more than that. You get up out of bed, right? And you brush your teeth, and you get in the shower, and you eat, and you go to school, and you go to work, and you study, and you sit, and some days you sit, and some days you exercise, and some days you just drive, and so all that together is called the total metabolic rate. So all the calories used in a day. So we're going to do a little calculation of, it's very general, on taking our basal metabolic rate and then figuring out our total metabolic rate. And then once you get those numbers, if you can figure out how many calories you put out in a day, your TMR, and how many you put in, which is your keeping track of your diet, your nutrients, right? Your calories in, what can we do to these numbers to lose weight? So if you know the calories in and the calories out, if they're equal, what happens to your weight? It stays the same. What can you do then to lose weight? What would you do to the TMR, the total metabolic rate? If you wanted to lose weight, you would have to increase it. Yes, so you'd have to start exercising more. Or you could, what could you do to the calories in, the input? You could lower it, right? You could eat less. To gain weight, if you wanted to gain weight, you should lower the TMR, and what would you do to the calories that you eat? You would increase them, right? So you can either one. If you're really interested in gaining weight, you would sit all day and eat a lot, right? And if you're really interested in losing weight, you would exercise all day and eat less. Okay, here's a question I want you to work on. It says, so many Americans want to lose weight. Diets are a big part of popular culture. Movie stars, doctors, athletes make a large profit on selling books, workout machines, food, and promise slimming results. Let's investigate a few. The 3-1-2-1 diet. Have you ever heard of that? The juice fast, the paleo or caveman diet, and Weight Watchers. So for each of these, I want you to investigate who advertises it and profits from it, how does it work, what can you eat, and how does it fail? Okay, so I want you to spend some time looking at this, and then we're going to discuss it online. Okay, or we can discuss other diets too if you want. I have tried the juice fast. Has anyone done that? Anyone done Weight Watchers? That's a popular one too. Okay? Alright, so pause the show, take a little time to investigate one of these, and then post it on Moodle. Nutrients. Carbohydrates, fats, proteins, water, mineral, vitamins. We have essential nutrients that come from our diet. We have non-essential, and those are the ones that our bodies can actually build. Vitamins, of course, are important, and I don't mean vitamins taken in a pill, okay? I mean vitamins in your food. Vitamins are used as coenzymes. They cannot be synthesized. The fat-soluble ones are A, D, E, and K. You need to memorize those. The water-soluble ones are B and C. What that means, like, have you ever taken vitamin E? Vitamin E comes as a capsule, and inside of it is a liquid, right? So that tells you it's fat-soluble right there, because it's in a liquid, it's in an oil. Water-soluble, have you ever taken a bunch of vitamin C, and then you go to the bathroom like a half an hour later, the toilet is yellow. It's always yellow. Okay, a bright yellow. How about that? That tells you it's water soluble. Bring it in, goes out. So we have to take, which one do we have to be sure to get often? The fat soluble or the water soluble? Which one does your body hold on to? Holds on to the fat soluble ones. The water soluble ones does not. So you have to make sure you keep getting the water soluble ones every day. A, D, E, and K. Now the reason I said vitamins in your food is because those come the right way. They are not processed, they're not extracted, they're not dehydrated, they're not put in a jar, they're not labeled, they're not put on a shelf, and they are not put in your mouth without the right combination of foods. Okay, so life is made with vitamins in food, and that's how you should eat your vitamins. Okay, if you feel you're not getting enough vitamins, eat the right food. Okay, I'm going to tell you, the vitamins you get in the jar are not sufficient. You need to have the vitamins with all the nutrients that go with it. So if you think you need more vitamin C, put an orange in your backpack. Peel it. Yeah, it smells really good. I like it when people peel an orange around me. It smells really nice. Not in class, okay? But outside of class, peel an orange. Share it. People love oranges, okay? Minerals are inorganic. You can, when you buy those, one-a-day pills or whatever, they come with minerals in them too. Not the best way to get your minerals. You should eat foods that have calcium, magnesium, iron. You can look all this up. If you don't remember from your nutrition class or you haven't investigated, look up what kinds of foods have calcium. I don't eat milk or dairy products. I don't eat meat. So I get calcium from vegetables. Free radicals and antioxidants. This is a picture. Glutathione is an antioxidant. Have you heard of those? So we'll talk about free radicals first. Free radicals have unpaired electrons. So recall that there are 2 electrons per orbital. Love that word. It's chemistry. Orbital. It's produced by the body. Usually the free radical is with a nitrogen or an oxygen, and the way we write it is like O2 with this dot. So the dot tells us it's a free radical. The problem with free radicals is they cause damage to lipids, proteins, and DNA. But it's okay because your body takes care of these by using antioxidants. Okay, so antioxidants bind to free radicals, some made by the body, others we eat. So that's another reason to eat that orange is vitamin C. Vitamin E is another one. These are all good things that your body can use as an antioxidant, and some are made like the glutathione. Okay? The regulation of metabolism. Oh, by the way, I know what I wanted to tell you. This is a huge marketing device right now. high in antioxidants, right? So just be aware that this stuff comes and goes. I've seen it, for all the years that I've been around. When I was a kid, we did no sugar. White sugar was evil. Okay, no white sugar, no white flour, and then in the 80s it changed and it became the fat-free, and then the 90s, and I don't know, the days keep changing. The goji berry now is high in antioxidants and pomegranate juice, and it just, they're always looking for something else to sell, right? So you can't blame them, but they're always looking for a new avenue. So when you see high in antioxidants, if it's a juice or something processed, it's not going to be that great for you. But if you want to buy a box of blueberries and eat the whole thing, you're going to get a good bunch of antioxidants. Great idea. Eat a whole box. Just pour them into your mouth. Energy reserves, we know, are stored as glycogen and adipose. Okay, so glycogen is the bunch of glucose molecules all in a row. Adipose is a bunch of fat molecules. So this is how we store. Remember, we don't store protein. Okay, eating is controlled by the hypothalamus. Serotonin and norepinephrine are the neurotransmitters involved in hunger. Okay, there are several theories on obesity, including hormones called, how do you think you say this word? Adipokines. You could say, I can't really say adipokines, but adipokines. The leptin is one of the hormones involved, called leptin. It's made by the adipose tissue. If it's high, it suppresses your appetite. If it's low, it promotes appetite. And the other one is called TNF alpha, reduces the sensitivity of insulin receptors. So have you heard of this? As people gain weight, they become obese, then they become insulin is no longer noticed by their receptors. What do we call this problem? This is called diabetes type 2. So a lot of diabetes type 2 is caused by the increase in this TNF alpha, which reduces the sensitivities of the insulin receptors. And it's simply because of weight, meaning adipose, the more adipose. So a lot of people can reverse their type 2 diabetes, and I'll tell you about that when we get to that section. Okay, if the following items were increased, how would they affect hunger in a person? So I want you to read through this list, and I want you to think about whether it makes you hungry or not hungry, okay? All right, let's go through each of these. If blood glucose levels was increased, would that mean that you're hungry or not hungry? Why would blood glucose be high? Would you have just eaten, or would you be hungry? It's blood glucose is high because you've just eaten, right? So blood glucose is high, you would not be hungry. Your body's happy, right? Amino acid levels are high. Are you hungry or not hungry? Not hungry because you just ate the amino acids, right? Adipose tissue, the more adipose tissue you have, should you be hungry or not hungry? Technically, you should not be hungry. Let me tell you, I don't see this. Technically, if you have adipose tissue, you have plenty of storage and you should not be hungry. But come on. The more I gain weight, the more hungry I get. Insulin. A lot of insulin is high because you just ate. So you're not hungry. Glucagon is released to pull energy out of storage. That must mean you are hungry. Epinephrine, what do you think of that? Running from the bear. Are you hungry when you are stressed and running from the bear? Should you stop and eat something when you're running from the bear? No, should not be stopping, okay? Stress, in this case, epinephrine stress, should not make you hungry. Cholecystokinin, CCK, we learned last time, it stops the stomach. Okay, so it says there's plenty of food in the stomach, slow down, okay? And so therefore, would you be hungry or not hungry? You would not be hungry with cholecystokinin. Distension of the stomach, that means the stomach is full. So if it's full of food, should you be hungry or not hungry? not hungry, right? And psychosocial influences. Now this is a big topic right here. When you go out with friends, do you eat more? Do you eat less? When your boyfriend dumps you, do you eat more? Do you eat less? I mean, when you do a breakup, are you hungry or not hungry? When you're worried about school, I don't know. You go out with friends, do you have more alcohol? Do you drink more? Right? Does that, and that's calories, right? There's, a glass of wine has 120 calories in it. Okay, so that's something to think about too. Oh, sitting in front of the TV, do you eat more? Do you eat less? Is it a habit for you? There's all kinds of things to think about. All right, what do we have next? This is a picture showing how insulin and glucagon and growth hormone, all these things have a role. Let's look at the plus signs. Okay, so when insulin is around, after you eat, you have lots of glucose, you're going to store. So this is glycogen, right? Insulin inhibits glycogen, so there's a negative sign here, the glycogen from being broken down into glucose. In the adipose, insulin tells glucose to become glycerol and stored as triglycerides and inhibits the breakdown. Okay, so these are catabolism, anabolism stories, right? So building up glycogen, but the building is anabolism. And the opposite, so if you're stressed, the epinephrine running from the bear or the glucagon, hours after not eating, glycogen will come out of storage. And what else do we have here? Glucagon, growth hormone, corticosteroids, epinephrine all encourage adipose tissue to be broken down into free fatty acids, which can be used then for energy. Okay? This is called the absorptive state right after you eat a meal versus the fasting or post-absorptive state. And I want to talk about the differences that we'll see in the hormones and the metabolism right after you eat versus when you're hungry. Okay? So right after you eat, insulin is high, glucagon is low, so you have a high insulin to glucagon ratio. There is formation of glycogen, fat, and protein. These are good times. These are all anabolism times, right? Building. Blood levels then lower for glucose, right? Because it was too high, right? After we eat, not too high. Let's just say it's high, and we have a range. Remember, there's always a range. So it's in the high range. Amino acids then and glucose and fatty acids will all have to go, and ketone bodies all go down after these hormones are released. Then, when you're fasting, let's say it's 4 or 5 hours later, you're getting hungry, insulin goes down, glucagon goes up, so you have a low insulin to glucagon ratio. We now do hydrolysis of glycogen, fat, and protein. We make new sugar, so we do gluconeogenesis. We start to break down fats and we get ketogenesis, the production of ketone bodies, so that the glucose goes up, amino acid goes up, fatty acid goes up, and ketone bodies go up. So this is homeostasis, right? Back and forth, keeping everything in balance, all right? So the body state, now we write it down. The absorptive state is the time shortly during and shortly after eating, when anabolism is greater than catabolism and it's controlled by insulin. Post-absorptive state, the GI tract is empty and use of reserves, so we use that fat and the glycogen, is controlled by glucagon. We do glycogenolysis and gluconeogenesis in the liver and lipolysis in the adipose tissue. Okay, so we break down glycogen and make new sugars, and we break down fats. And if you get too far, which is called fasting, by this we would mean like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hours, excessive lipolysis starts to happen. Eventually it could lead to starvation. And during starvation and fasting days, ketone bodies get really high, and that is a problem because when we break down too much lipids, the ketone bodies are actually acidic and they cause ketoacidosis. And we will talk about the importance of blood pH another time, but you already know that it's important to keep it between 7.35 and 7.45, right? So changing it messes up the body, and so it's important not to starve, okay, which is not something we have problems with in the United States. Luckily. We have the opposite problem, right? Fun fact, some people say that celery has negative calories. This means that it takes more calories to digest it than other foods. Sorry, that is not true, okay? It's true that we don't get a lot of nutrients out of celery. What we get, though, is the fiber. So remember we talked about fiber before, being very important for the large intestine. Got to have the cellulose in every day, have a salad, okay? The last two topics are diabetes type 1 and 2. Type 1 is called insulin-dependent diabetes mellitus. There is another type of diabetes. It's called diabetes insipidus. It is caused by a pituitary problem. This is diabetes mellitus. So when most people say diabetes, this is the one they mean, okay? And actually, when most people say diabetes today, they mean type 2. So type 1 is people are dependent on insulin. That's the only way they can fix their problem, is to take shots of insulin. 10% of diabetics are type 1. It's an autoimmune disease when the body decides all of a sudden to attack itself. We've talked about these before. The lupus, the Graves' disease, the different types of like rheumatoid arthritis, and the list goes on and we don't understand very well how this works. The immune system destroys the beta cells, which then they no longer make insulin, right? Or yeah, this lady, I'm sorry, I'm stuck on the picture. What is she doing, this lady here? She's checking her blood sugar, right? So diabetics poke themselves all the time to measure their blood sugar. This makes it, this invention was awesome, to be able to have people check their blood sugar constantly so they know whether or not they need the insulin, okay? It's common for these people to have ketoacidosis. If the insulin drops, then their body's going to start looking for fats in order to make energy. And so then they lose fat, they lose weight, especially if it's uncontrolled diabetes. Okay, so if someone doesn't know they have type 1 diabetes, what would be some of their symptoms? They would have thirst, they would have blurry vision, they would have weight loss, they'd be just getting thinner and thinner and thinner, being tired all the time. Those are some of the symptoms that they have, okay? And so then they would go to the doctor to get it tested, and it actually wouldn't take long to see that the insulin levels are low and that the sugars are high. Glucose would be really, really high. And you would see ketone bodies. That's the body's way of trying to get energy. The onset is usually under age 20, so very common to be preteen when this happens. 10, 11, 12, even younger for this to happen. And the crazy thing is, a lot of people are starting to get this in their 20s or in their 30s. So we're seeing more and more people. We used to call it juvenile diabetes, and now they're not really calling it that because so many older adults, not older, but adults are getting it. Okay, older adults, once you're past 30s, 40s, you won't see usually type 1 diabetes happening. Okay? We treat with insulin injections. So my brother is a type 1 diabetic. My brother-in-law is a type 1 diabetic. They don't use the injections anymore. They have these really cool pumps that they use. Has a small needle that goes into their skin. They wear it, under their pants on their abdomen, and it comes with a little device that holds the insulin. It's a little vial of insulin, and then a battery-operated device that they can inject the insulin that way under their skin. They seem to be really happy with it. It's harder for some children to use. I think the younger kids at school, they usually go to the nurse's office to get their insulin injections. But it's an option for a lot of people, and it's becoming more and more affordable to do it. There are problems, of course, always with insulin injections, which is to make sure that you get the dosage correct, because if you give too much, then the blood sugar drops, and if you give not enough, then the blood sugar is too high. Okay, so it's always a balancing act, I think, for a type 1 diabetic. Type 2 diabetes is called non-insulin dependent diabetes. The cells become resistant to insulin. We talked about this. This is hereditary or due to obesity. Now, I'm not big on the word hereditary. I do think that lifestyle is hereditary. So I think a lot of things, just because your parents had it or your grandparents have it, does not mean that you're going to get it. I think that a lot of things that we get from our families are eating habits, exercise habits, lifestyle habits. Parents who smoke have kids who smoke. Parents who overeat have kids who overeat. It kind of, that runs in families, right? Think about that. Drinking alcohol runs in families. So by that meaning we see it for our whole childhood, right? And then we carry that into our adult life, and then we pass it on to our kids. So it's possible to totally break the obesity, to break the type 2 diabetes that runs in families. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. Okay, right? It's hard to lose weight. It's hard to change your diet. It's rare to have ketoacidosis in this case. So you'll notice that when people get type 2, they're not going to get thin and underweight. And the onset is usually over age 40. You would treat this with diet, exercise, drugs that stimulate insulin sensitivity. I forgot the name of it now. Someone will have to remind me of the name of the drug that most people take. Starts with an M. Can't think of it. There's a drug that a lot of people take for type 2 diabetes. I do know several people who have reversed their type 2 diabetes. It's harder as they get older. I had a student with her dad had type 2 diabetes so badly he had one of his legs, lower legs, amputated. And the reason for that, by the way, is with all that sugar actually causes inflammation of the capillaries and the neurons, and then with inflammation you don't get good blood flow to the extremities, especially to the feet, right? Because they hang down. So you don't get a lot of good return of blood back to the heart from your feet. And so a lot of people get swelling and infections in their feet because there's poor circulation. So she's very worried about it. And then after she took my class in the spring semester, she emailed me in the summer, or in the fall, telling me that summer she had felt sick and ill, and she went to the ER and they told her she had type 2 diabetes. She's 26 years old. She couldn't believe it because we had been talking about her dad and how he wasn't changing his lifestyle. So she told me she lost weight. She's been exercising. In fact, she had lost like 25 pounds since June, and she's so happy that she learned about type 2 diabetes and it can be reversed. She's trying to get off the drugs and change her life instead. Okay, I have a friend who was 50 maybe when he did it, and of course it took him a couple of years because he had been type 2 diabetic for a while. He looks great. He feels great. Doesn't have any drugs that he needs to take anymore. He takes good care of himself. Okay, I think that is it. If you have any questions about these things, feel free to talk to me about it, okay?